Hello and welcome to the Migrating Apps to the Cloud 4 Models and Use Cases presented by ShadowSoft. Look forward to our time together today as we discuss the different ways and means of determining the best method and end result of taking advantage of cloud computing. We are going to look at an agenda today. We're going to certainly talk about myself for a few moments. We're going to be looking at where we are in the marketplace today. We're going to look at the 4 primary migration models, and we're going to discuss some specific use cases that are often used as a method to determine what should be applied both to individual point solutions and to your entire organization and infrastructure. Joining you today, my name is John Himebook. I am a Vice President of Development here at ShadowSoft in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been doing this since 1987 and have had the benefit of seeing many different business models from an IT infrastructure perspective, and have had the opportunity in the consulting world to ride the wave through these. So going from mainframe to client server to distributed and now cloud, and the various models from very much a structured to your waterfalls to your extreme programming, now to the agile and really the DevOps paradigm that we are all living in today. I have had the opportunity of working both as a consultant and on the procurement side and working with consultants, and have had the opportunity to experience this extensively, including founding a SaaS-based company in 2001 that was ahead of its time moving forward. So we're going to be focusing today on really how we connect to the customer. Our development efforts at ShadowSoft are focused really in the social mobility analytics and cloud area, in that our belief, and as we go into the body, our belief is that you need to be as close to your customer as possible. Very briefly on ShadowSoft, we are a 10-year-old open source integrator firm, and our goal is to take the power back. And it's an interesting statement. So many of our organizations and our clients and even myself have been trapped in enterprise agreements, have been trapped in legacy applications, have been trapped in models where your team, your structure, your company are just unable to break out and take advantage of the innovation tools today. With the open source paradigm, we've had the opportunity to really consult and offer managed services in that DevOps, apps infrastructure, and cloud area that allow our people to get into our innovation as opposed to execution and operations. We have had over 20 cloud migrations in the last 24 months. We are a certified cloud provider. We are a reseller in the Azure space as well as Amazon and Google. And we are a gold Microsoft cloud, which is in the open space world is somewhat of a unicorn when you look at our experiences. That's enough about us. Let's start talking about yourselves. When you look at the 2017 challenges, we have a gap. We have a gap of our back office systems and our infrastructure and our development getting to the end customer. We have a gap in the speed of market. We have so many legacy apps. We have so many infrastructure-rich environments that are not allowing us the flexibility and the effectiveness. And we are focusing so much of our time. We've heard numbers of up 80% are execution and operation, and that 20% innovation. And so when we look at that paradigm, when you look at open source especially, where you have communities that are working together to the greater good, when you have software that you can implement and take advantage of all of the community developers, when you have the non-licensing models, etc., we really can take that power back and allow you to now focus on innovation, execute at the speed of the market, and you certainly want to create a relationship to a customer, and we'll discuss that again as we get further. So let's talk about getting close to our customer. When you get close to a customer, you are creating an instant decision tree. One of the examples we'll use later is how you can get a customer to interact with the company within the constraints of the company and yet the perception of a greater service. You also are dealing with the attention span of our customers today. Customers today expect things in seconds, not minutes, certainly not days. I think we're seeing that more and more with Amazon and now Walmart, and the immediate gratification, and our systems have to be able to respond and such. We expect the same experiences at work as we do at home. We all live in the app world now. And so when we come into work and we are working on legacy apps and legacy systems, it's not satisfying. It becomes a real deterrent to retaining your staff and attracting new staff. And the relationship to dollars. It doesn't really matter. At some point when you sell, you have to have a relationship to the person that's purchasing. So this is where we really want to focus our time and effort. The other thing we want to focus on today is move at the speed of the market. You know, in the old days, and you know, I mentioned I've been doing this 3 decades, we would have logical data maps and we would have the whole system laid out for months and then start the development. And in 2 or 3 years, we would develop a mission-critical large system that we hope meets the business needs as were defined 3 years ago. That doesn't work today. We now have minutes or days, not weeks or months. We've got to cut the middleman. Even if it's a middleman, literally, we've got to move it where their systems operate the same or similar. We've got to create interfaces that allow you to have those informations real time. And you've got to create this convenience factor to the end user customer and even to your end user employee. The other thing we want to focus on is innovation. And we kind of hit this briefly, but this is the smallest budget that has the most impact. When you look at the open source effectiveness, this is what allows you to innovate quickly because it's no longer your team, it is the community surrounding this team. And it gives you the opportunity to truly stay in business because you are now able to respond and make these types of decisions and execution as we go forward. So let's look at the 4 migrations that we really want to talk through today. And I'm going to just slow it down a little bit. I mentioned I live in the South, but I am not from the South. So I'm going to slow it down a little bit. And the first one we're going to talk about is lift and shift. And that is merely taking your infrastructure and putting it into a cloud model. And this could be pure cloud, public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud. You could throw all kinds of clouds at this. But this is the opportunity to just offload that from your own bare metal environment. The second is a shift to a SaaS. And the software as a solution model, we define this as the sport of non-defining apps in the applications that you have to have that do not define who you are as a company. And we'll talk about that again as an example. But these are the things that you're in business because of these solutions, but these solutions are not your business. The other thing we want to look at is app modernization. Modernization of very specific applications can be critical. If you have some areas that need to touch the customer, need to be able to have the speed, agility, innovation, but the back office, some of the deeper systems are not as critical, or if you have a dependency on third parties, and you can do that through APIs, through other connectivity areas. And then our final is the replatforming. And replatforming is truly a paradigm shift where a decision is made to future-proof and to build your infrastructure in a cloud-native system so that you have the speed, agility, innovation on across your entire enterprise. So let's get a little more detailed. Let's talk lift and shift. Lift and shift is extremely efficient. We'll go with that instead of fast. It is typically taking an existing application, it is making minor changes to allow for cloud computing, and it is moving it from a data center or a hosted facility into a cloud environment. The benefit is scalability and performance, and may or may not take advantage of some of the speed and the innovation, but you will certainly be able to deal with the resiliency of the cloud. And a use case here, we had the opportunity to work with a fairly large logistics organization. They did have a mandate to go to the cloud. This was a top-down decision, but not a lot of rules. This particular application did not require many changes. It was not terribly dynamic, and it was a back-office execution engine. So we weren't making significant changes to the application, nor had they made significant changes in quite some time. They did not want to break it up and basically fractionalize a monolithic application. And the CIO did not have a whole lot of money to put into this cloud effort. Where the advantage of lift and shift comes in is that we were able, at a very cost-effective, to move it into the cloud. It actually did save him money on the infrastructure. He no longer had to have an infrastructure that was built to peak. He could then have we scaled to peak, so he was paying for exactly what he used, reducing that cost. We refocused his team and the budget onto mission-critical applications, so he was able to deploy that team that was doing the support of the infrastructure and move them into areas such as security, such as connectivity. And we were able to execute this in weeks, not months. And so he had a win. Our CIO is one of our biggest fans because we were able to do a check mark. More importantly, he was able to reconstitute his own team and be able to use them more effectively in mission critical. Saving money, determining normal operational load and peak, and he migrated the app. As is, we did very minor tweaks around that security using his own team. Next model we want to talk about is a true shift to the software as a solution. In the software as a solution, we again, I want to highlight non-defining apps that take up your valuable resources. Typically, you'll see this in email, your CRM, your payroll, your document management, in any of these systems that you have to be in business, but again, do not define your business. So in this case, we had a large manufacturing organization. They had their manufacturing software, they had their floor, all of their different systems, payroll, think transient labor. So we had lots of different payroll types of opportunities, and our decision with them was to move to Office 365. We passed on the responsibility and support to the service provider. In this case, we are a certified service provider on Azure. So ShadowSoft became the intermediary, and we freed up their IT resources to work on their customer-facing and their floor apps, as opposed to working on email and workflow. We created a very solid migration path. We had it well tested in advance. We had a managed solution for the maximum resiliency, and we did the conversion overnight during non-work hours. So from the end customer perspective, their impact was extremely low. Their value was extremely high. And we had the opportunity to develop custom workflows for optimization and task management. So the nice thing in this SaaS model, not only were we able to replace a current system, we immediately gave but wait, there's more. And you'll hear me talk about but wait, but there's more from this point forward as we're moving and now taking advantage of the cloud. This is an opportunity to really get the resiliency and the non-defining applications where you know they work and you don't have to think about it anymore. That really is the key from a CIO perspective. Our third area is getting a little more complex. Now we're going to talk about app modernization and refactoring. In app modernization, this is where you have certain applications that do define your business that require the speed, agility, and innovation. So we want to get you as close to your customer as possible. You want to be able to execute at the speed of business, and you want to ensure that you are taking advantage of modern innovation. In this world, one thing we do with ShadowSoft is we help identify the specific apps that need to be modernized, that make sense to be hosted in the cloud, that make sense to offer additional innovations to extend your service, to extend your relationship to that customer. These are focused on the ability to update and integrate in the future, and we are embracing cloud configuration, automation, and security. In the migration or modernization world, we like to say that this is what makes you truly unique as a business when these apps are modernized and you are then able to add additional functionality that you would not have been able to currently and that you are able to now dream up. In modernization, we often find using the customers, both for user experience and also for the new workflows and the new, I wish there were, as a product manager, just become critical to app modernization. The example we want to talk through today, just very briefly, was actually a utility software company, and they were in a legacy system. In order to make a change to the legacy system, it was requiring typically days to make slight changes, months to make major changes. This software was installed uniquely at each of their clients, and each of the user-defined fields were hard-coded into the app. So making changes, the support for this software, I believe nightmare might be the appropriate word. What the end users were asking was more customization, more personalization. They had to ensure a disaster recovery model, and frankly, they wanted a SaaS model. They wanted something that was available to them from a cloud perspective with less impact and less infrastructure. When we went to this solution, first thing we did was we determined what is in fact the appropriate app. They had some applications that were already very flexible. They were already very agile. They had some monolithic. We first determined what they needed from a development platform. We looked at doing a full replatforming. That was too much. So when we came back to modernization, then we looked at the various tools. We did an evaluation using their team, their skill sets, their current relationships and contracting, and made the decision on what platform to do the development, and from a licensing perspective, how to move forward. In this example, we literally changed their marketplace. They are now a global provider as opposed to domestic. They are offering services to electric, water, sewer, and even sanitation in the same application. We developed the most difficult module, and then we trained their staff. So we actually spent months with their team getting them into how to build and support and enhance these solutions. And they now has a SaaS. DR is out of the box. This did come into an Azure. In fact, in this case, this client is now a Microsoft ISP. So they're a service provider with embedded technology in their core offering. And it's a hybrid. So there are certain pieces still on-prem, such as their credit card processing, check imaging, some of the just things that have to happen when you go pay an electric bill. But much of their system is completely in the cloud with the appropriate resiliency and security, and now globalization. Our final stop for the tour today, and I'm watching our time carefully here, is a true replatforming. And replatforming is for the organization. They want scalable, elastic, robust, resilient, redundant, high availability systems across the board. That's a lot of really good consulting words, but more importantly, it's really good CIO words. We want to make IT a critical piece of the business in all aspects of the business, as opposed to a support service that is serving up both non-defining and defining applications to get close to your customer. Replatforming is a decision typically made at the top to step back, redevelop your tools completely cloud native, completely in the cloud open source model, so that every option is available to any of your applications when you get into containers, microservice architecture, and the resiliency and speed. We're going to talk about a healthcare company today. If you guys are living around the healthcare world, you find a lot of really difficult times. In our replatforming example, what we found is in patient scheduling, and I'm going to talk about the use case here because it really does tie why the replatforming was critical. In this case, a patient would call into a doctor's office and request an appointment. Well, patients think everything is an emergency. They would be put off to an appropriate time. It was taking time from the office management staff to interact with those phone calls. Then they're trying to interact with the scheduling from the physician and the calendars, etc. When the decision came to replatform in this case, we did a true replatform. So the scheduling system, the patient record, the calendaring, etc., and put together a mobile application that started at that customer. Again, we're going to get close to that decision making. We're going to capture them when they have the attention. So what we were able to do is we provided the customer experience, the patient experience, to where they could schedule an appointment, and based upon criteria they answered, we were able to schedule it to the appropriate time that the doctor had availability. So they were a much higher satisfaction, wasn't going back and forth on trying to get an appointment. The record of the doctor had much more information prior to the visit, so they were able to use a much higher use of the physician's assistant. We were able to save the development platform, so now when they come in, the patient information is there, plus the information entered to schedule the appointment via mobile phone, etc. In this case, what we were able to do is we identified the appropriate cloud-native development platform, and these are things like OpenShift or Pivotal Cloud Foundry, and we were able to stand up the reference implementation, taught that group of developers how to implement the technology, and then we provided the resources for additional training on specific point solution projects. This particular solution, we took the phone out of the process. We made the patient interact directly with the system. Their satisfaction went up. The doctor was more effective because he grouped the patients by type. So post-op were on Tuesday afternoons. And we were actually able to get much more insight into the appointments. I do want to talk a little bit about point solutions, because I just mentioned such as PCF or OpenShift, etc. When you go into replatforming, you do make a decision on the replatforming platform of choice. In modernization, you actually can do pieces and parts. OpenShift, for instance, has a fantastic model of very slight changes to the development paradigm, very slight changes to the operational paradigm, still allowing you to develop in your .NET or PHP or Java or any of your other tools, and have it end up in a container in the cloud. PCF is typically more when it's replatform time and you do a top-down. So I want to kind of step back and talk about what we just went through today. So again, lift and shift is take advantage of resiliency and scale, not so much on the application side. The software as a solution is really taking advantage of other people's expertise, other firms, in managing and operating your non-defining business. Modernization are specific tools and specific applications that need to have the resiliency, innovation, market speed, and that relationship to your end customer. And replatforming is truly a top-down replatforming the entire organization to ensure that you are future-proofed, that you are able to respond. At ShadowSoft, we offer two ways that are frequently used in tandem. The first we like to offer is our cloud readiness assessment. This is a typically 3 to 6 week engagement, and we look at best practices. We do look across the cloud providers. We look at your environment. We make recommendations for a migration model. We will help design the cloud environment and some key decisions, especially around governance. And we'll ensure that you have all ancillary folks involved. You know, cloud is not just an IT solution. It does include your development, your security, your operations, and your product. So that is one element where we can determine and help you determine where you need to be in the cloud. The other thing we offer today is an OpenShift on Azure workshop, or OpenShift on AWS as well. But Azure is able to sponsor this with Microsoft. This is 4 days of extremely tailored content on how to deploy OpenShift on Azure and or AWS. We learn different use cases and actually get to play and execute, and we will build a POC during the workshop. And again, at OpenShift especially, your Java developers still write in Java. They're not writing in a cloud-native proprietary language. Your operations team still operate in a Linux-type environment, just with some twists. And so this is an opportunity to come in for a few days and be able to not only teach, but demonstrate how to move forward. I appreciate your time today. I think we ran a little bit longer than anticipated. I am certainly available for any questions you may have, and we have about 5 minutes left that we can chat. We did receive one question in writing, and the difference on the Azure and the AWS workshop. One thing that we wanted to highlight, and I don't think I was deep enough on the slide, with the Azure Linux Anywhere program as part of their component, they have partnered with us and are actually helping to drive that program from a compensation perspective. so that our customers get the value of the program without having to do the outlay. When we do the OpenShift and AWS, it may or may not include customer interaction. So that is the primary difference of the two. We are equally partnered so that we don't have the bias there on the selection process. If there are additional questions, you do need to type them into the screen. I didn't clarify that on the front end, and I'll just pause for a moment. All right then. Well, we'll take that as an inclusive process today. I appreciate the time again and look forward to any type of follow-up. Oh, one moment, please. This is a question. The question is, what percentage of cloud migrations you guys have performed would you say are lift and shift versus replatforming, et cetera? Great question. It's actually a blend. In a typical mandate move to the cloud, we do see lift and shift occurring fairly frequently, especially over the last several years, where people are moving out of either an on-prem or a co-located environment. In the replatforming and in the app modernization space, really the last 2 or 3 years have been proven to be there. And I would put it fairly equal, but different effect. Your lift and shift is much more of an efficiency play. Our replatforming and modernization are true change of business, and we're seeing that more and more. I will tell you, I personally spend probably 80% of my day is focusing on the application side and 20% more on the infrastructure side, which is more that lift, shift, and SaaS. And like you, I wish this was a little more verbal so we could interact more quickly if there's a follow-up. My contact information is on the screen. Again, this is John Himebook with ShadowSoft. Welcome any of these questions or continued conversations if you see fit, and appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.